Welcome to our new episode of Looking into Cultures. I'm Cynthia Warren, your host, and this is Frank Ficini, our co-host. And today we have a fabulous guest, Marlisa McLaughlin, who many of you may already know from her other show, Health Buzz. And I asked Marlisa to be on when I found out that she lived in Iceland for almost 20 years. And so can you tell us about what took you to Iceland and about your life there?
Sure. Love took me to Iceland. Honest and truly, I was an exchange student. I had a Eurail train pass with a girlfriend of mine. We were in London studying, and we took a semester. And 4 days into the train ride, after I just had been at my sister's wedding and said, I'm never getting married, I ended up in a cabin with my soon-to-be Icelandic husband.
Okay.
So we met on a train. We were together for 54 hours. We went from Basel, Switzerland. I know, right? Like now I have children. I'm like, Dad, how did you do that? But we went to Greece. We ended up going to Yugoslavia and then down to Greece. And we spent 55 hours on the train and 5 or 6 days in Greece.
Wow.
And it was the day of film, like, you know, the old film you had to develop.
Oh, right.
So that's all I had in my camera as a memory of this man. And we wrote letters to each other every day. Except there was a postal strike in Iceland, so I never received his letters when I got back to London, and he received all of mine. And it was kind of funny because I got to London and I went to the post office and I got my postal box. It was empty, and I was like, you know, like what happened? So I didn't have any money because it got stolen on the trip. So I called reverse charges, and his mom answered. And I'm like, hi, I am your new in-law to be, you know, your daughter-in-law to be. And she said,
So you got engaged during 56 hours on a train?
10 days, really.
Oh.
But I didn't even remember what he looked like. He was just in my heart. Oh. Yeah. And then his mother said to me, haven't you heard that there is a postal strike here in Iceland? And I was thinking, you don't know, I was stuck out in the desert with no money, just got robbed.
Which desert?
We were in Morocco.
Oh.
At the time, we had split up after that trip because I still had Eurail time and he was finished with his.
Okay, so he went back to Iceland.
Yes.
Okay, so then from the time that, you know, you got back to London to the time you actually went to Iceland and got married, how much time was that?
It was October when I came back from my trip and to London, and then I went straight back to the States. Wow. October, and then I went in February to Iceland for the very first time ever. I didn't really even know where it was. That was a typical American at that time, because now everyone knows where Iceland is.
Oh, I'm not so sure of that.
Almost, but at least, you know, like I drew a picture of myself on a snowmobile, you know, going to an igloo as a joke. I mean, that's how base my
You drew a
knowledge
picture,
was.
you mean like a cartoon and left it behind in America?
No, I was just doodling one day, and I was imagining what life was going to be like, and out came that doodle, and I kind of had to laugh, because I knew they were, you know, modern culture. But I really didn't know much about Iceland, and I didn't care.
Where did your husband's family live?
Part in Reykjavik, in the southern city, and then part in Húsavík, which is a little village, very similar to, reminded me of Stonington. Yeah, a little fishing village.
So did you get married in Reykjavik?
Yes, we did.
And then did you immediately go to Húsavík in order to live?
No, but we traveled there a lot and visited his family there during the time that I was there. So from February, I was an au pair for an airline stewardess and a workaholic. I'm sorry, Bjarni. She worked a lot, so they weren't home a lot, and I was with a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old. And so I learned the language quickly because I was the mother of the household at the time, right?
Yeah.
But you were learning the language, as you said before,
From the
From a
4-year-old.
four-year-old.
And all the kids in my husband at the time, his family, I hung out with a lot because they were very patient
that
and
is
taught me things.
ideal.
It was
Really?
great. It was really fun. And then I got married. His sister was getting married to a man from Holland, so we had to wait for that wedding. So we got married in August of that year. So it was
Okay.
8 or 9 months.
Did your family come over from the United States? To the
My
wedding?
dad and his wife came.
Yeah. And did you have is there such a thing as a typical Icelandic wedding? What was your wedding like?
It was very simple and very sweet. I don't know if you could call it typical. We went to Árborgarstofn, which is maybe you went. It's a little village, very much like Sturbridge Village. So it was replicas of all of the old houses.
No, I didn't go there.
Oh,
Yeah.
really sweet. And there was a little old wooden church, and his grandmother, who was the first foreigner in that family, she was Danish, and she was traveling and met their grandfather and created this lineage. So she was at the organ. It was a pump organ. And we were in this tiny little turf-roofed church, and
That's lovely, yeah.
it was really sweet. And then we just had a celebration back at the apartment in town at his mom's.
Now, what kind of foods do you eat at a wedding celebration in Iceland? I've heard about this fermented shark's fin.
We didn't do any, no, we did not do the traditional foods. No. I don't actually even remember. I think we just did a very simple, mixture of whatever we were eating, maybe lamb and rice and salad, but we did do the traditional cake, which is rolled up marzipan.
Oh.
And you do it in rings, so it creates like a tower about so high, and then you put frosting on it and little candies that all came from England, actually.
Oh, that sounds
And little
That's
Icelandic flags all over the place. So, yeah. So that's what we did.
So tell us the inclusive years that you lived there, like starting when and then when did you move back to the U.S.? Just so we can get the period
Oh yeah, so
straight.
I was very lucky. I consider the time span that I was there probably the luckiest time in the cultural shift in Iceland. I was there from 1984. That's when I first arrived. I got married in 1985. I met him in 84. So in 1985, and then we stayed there for that whole summer, from the winter through to the summer, and then came back to the States just for him to meet my family.
Oh, okay.
I think we might have, the timeline is a little difficult to pull up because we did go back and forth a lot.
Okay.
Because we wanted to visit each other's countries.
Right.
But we primarily lived in Iceland there for 3 or 4 years. And then we had children. Well, we had our first daughter, and then there was a 7, and we were here for 3 of those years, and went back to the north and lived in a little village. Oh, cool. And then had
And that
our
was Húsavík, right?
correct.
Oh, okay.
Which is actually, if anyone has seen Eurovision, that movie with Will Ferrell, there was a drone that took a photograph of our village from the mountaintop that we
an
used
aerial
to climb.
view?
It was so beautiful. I was watching it with the kids, and I was like, I almost couldn't watch it. It was so touching. It made me want to sob. It was such a feeling of home because so many beautiful things occurred in that little village.
Wow. Well, Iceland is a phenomenal place. I went there for the first time in January for only 9 days, and I took one tour to, what was the name of that national park I went to?
Þingvellir.
Okay, Þingvellir.
Good.
And I love nature so much that, to me, that's like paradise. I mean, Iceland is like, it's a vision to behold. And some of the images are playing behind us now. Of course, that's the cathedral right now. But there's a lot of images here of the geothermal activity. So how about the question about nature?
Nature, I was going to ask about the past.
Okay, go ahead.
How important is the past in Iceland?
Oh.
You know, Vikings and Danish rule, that type of thing.
The history is like paramount. At
People-
least it was when I was there.
Yeah.
And like I wanted to say, but I got distracted. I'm sorry about that. Is that I was there before there was a huge immigration shift and before the culture really started to change and adapt to more of an integrated global community. So I was there when there were still people living in their turf-roofed houses.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Not a lot, but out in the country, and we only had television. It was a state-run television program that ran only in the evenings for the news and between the hours of like 4 and 12. And then nothing on Thursday.
And of course, there was no internet. There were no cell phones.
It was so simple.
Really back to nature.
Yeah.
Very much. And beer was illegal. I was telling you that beer was illegal because they were trying to sort of like put maintain alcoholism and keep it kind of moderate.
Well, even though you said they allowed the hard stuff.
Oh, yeah. They're hardcores. They're really hardcore
So
people.
without all this entertainment and only one television channel and these very long winter nights, I mean, how do people in a small village like Husavik, how do they entertain themselves? Is there a lot of like communal singing?
Yes. It's a lot of music, a lot of dinner parties, and just the regular visiting that we used to do in the States back in the day before everything shifted, where you could just walk outside whenever you wanted to and go knock at the door and say, hey, do you have, as they would say, do you have 10 drops? You know, that was really...
10 what?
10 drops of coffee.
It
It just means like a small pour
Oh,
of
I thought maybe it was
alcohol.
booze.
No. And baking together and a lot of reminiscing and a lot of time and a lot of storytelling and history. You know, like that was a traditional
I
passing
think it's a
on.
great loss. I think it's a great loss, that kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. I don't know.
We've gotten too attached to our devices, and we're not communicating in person as much.
Yeah, well, that when I was there, it was all about being together and honoring family. Really, I'm getting really choked up. I didn't expect this to happen.
Our goal is to make you cry.
It will be easy to do.
We don't even have any Kleenex here.
No, because there was such a rich, deep respect for all things, like family and nature, and the food was very simple. We didn't have a lot of it. As a matter of fact, you could barely get peanut butter. It was so expensive because the imports were very limited. I was also saying that like IKEA was one of the main import stores, so like every household that you would go into had almost the exact same furniture and decor. And people ate the same foods, and they told the same stories of their childhood. So a
very unified society in that regard.
very homogenous. And the depth and the richness of the imagination and creativity and all the reading that they did, and the level of creative liberation was, I think, is really powerful in Iceland, and that made it all come alive. It was not a boring place. And people used to say that to me all the time. Iceland, what do you do over there? There's nothing to do. I'm like, oh, yeah.
I'd like to live there.
Yeah. Well, it's different now. Very
But
different.
I mean, still the nature, I mean, of course you said that now it's a lot more controlled because of mass tourism. They have to control.
They always were very respectful. Paths were delineated. You weren't allowed to walk in places that could have damaged the flora. Just like here in the presidential range, they'll tell you, don't step off the path because you might kill something that's hard to grow. And my family over there was very, very conscious about that and had people working in nature preserves. So I got a lot of information. And I was a whale watching guide, so I got
You were a whale watching guy?
Yeah, at the end of my stay there, I ended up learning a lot about the history and the culture. And
Wow.
Well,
Did you see a lot of
going to
whales
do-
when you were there?
many, almost every single species were in the bay the 4 years I was there.
The bay in
In the north.
Husavik?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
House Bay.
So you've done whale watching guiding, and I understand that you're still guiding and you're taking groups to Iceland now.
Yeah, I'm going to take my first group in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like, what are you including in your tours?
A 9-day tour, and how I want to do it is have them land in the city and spend a day in the city. And did you go to see Fly Over Iceland? Did you go to that? It's an exhibit.
No, I didn't. In fact, in 9 days, I stayed in Reykjavik, and I only took a 1-day tour outside of Reykjavik, but I also did 2 nights looking for the Aurora Borealis, which they claimed I saw, but I don't think I saw it. So, to me, the whole Aurora Borealis tourism aspect is quite, I don't know, it's something that I feel like in a way is very risky with your money because you're not guaranteed to see it. And it's different than if you lived there and you could just walk out your door. I mean, how many times did you see the Aurora Borealis in the like 20 years you lived there?
Often.
I mean, to me, that's a very spiritual thing.
It is. It actually looks like spirits
look like
walking. They really
spirits.
do. It was amazing.
How do Icelanders feel about the mass tourism of people going there to see the aurora borealis? Do they welcome that, or are they kind of
And
tired
try to
of it?
relate that to the change from the time you were there living in a turf-roofed house to the present day. You're being a guide there. How has it?
I didn't live in a turf-roofed house, not me.
Oh, okay.
But people were
But you
still.
lived in a small village.
Yes, but there were still people living
Yeah,
in turf,
okay.
which is a delineation of how life has changed because mostly things have become modernized.
Right.
I think that the only person that was famous when I was there in the 80s was the poet W.H. Auden, a romantic English poet, and wrote an essay and hated it, couldn't stand it because of
He
the
hated
weather.
Iceland?
The weather was so brutal, and the accommodations were very different then, and everything was much more primitive. So tourism was very minimal, and people either said they loved Iceland or they hated Iceland, and that was very, very limited to that, and it just gradually started to change and grow.
But in your view, has tourism, has this mass tourism, which the model now in the world is, the primary model of tourism is mass tourism, is it a good change?
I don't think so.
No.
So tell me some of the pros and cons of that for Iceland.
Here's a simple example. So all of my friends that lived in Reykjavik, some of them, not all of them, but many of them even left the city and rented elsewhere during the summer peak season. All of the stores on Laugavegur, the main shopping street, like Saks Fifth Avenue, but we only have one major street.
And by the way, on that street, there are a lot of nice thrift stores.
That changed too. There never was any when I was there.
Oh, okay.
It was unheard of. But the tourism is such that many people have sold their property on the main street, and they only have tourism on that street and apartments for rent and Airbnb. So the culture has just kind of like flattened out.
Kind of reminds me of Mystic a
It's
little bit.
very much like Mystic. I have
could
2 Airbnbs across the street from me right now.
So it's really changed a lot, and a lot of my people over there are very disappointed and sad about it. But there is, there's this thing that I learned about Iceland when I got there right away, and that it's a small country, and they'll always talk per capita. Like in Iceland, did you know per capita we have the most this and the most that?
Oh.
They have that mentality of wanting to really be appreciated on a national scale despite their size.
Yeah.
And so they're very proud of their culture, and how can they not be? It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful land. And the richness and the tenacity of the development of the people, you can't even imagine being trapped inside a turf home where you've got dung of animal below you, and the long kitchen smoking fat and whale fat and all of those smells. And if you get snowed in and you're stuck with your extended family, you have to be very, you have to navigate those emotions and what's happening there in such a way so you don't have mutiny, and that your history and your culture can grow, and you can, your family can strengthen, not
And
weaken.
how did they do that?
They started in 874, so they've had hundreds of years. I don't know how it went down, but the family that I came into, they taught me so much, and there's a respect and there are lines you just don't cross. Excuse me, I'm not sure that's still the same, because once you start getting
So
broad
generational
like that,
respect then. too.
totally, and
Yeah.
that's part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
And like my father-in-law had died before I entered the family, but I felt like I knew him because they kept his memory so alive with the stories. He was there at every gathering.
So the past is very important.
Very
Yeah.
important.
So what about the sagas? I mean, for example, do they still like recite these sagas, or do they still enact them, or narrate them?
Yeah. I mean, when I was there, it was a lot. Like I remember my husband was an anthropology student, and we took a tour, and we weren't even out of the city, and his professor was on the bus telling all the stories from the sagas about town, and I thought he was joking because I'd never seen anyone be able to narrate where we were living. You know, the history wasn't evident like that. But and then be careful, folks, when you travel, because sometimes they will make up the sagas. Oh, see this property of this land we're passing by, and tell stories like that. But it doesn't matter because it's in their history and their blood. And
I think we should note that saga is like an epic poem that encapsulates the history, right? And the myths as well.
Yeah, and some of those stories have roots of truth to them too, and talk about the lineages of the families. Like for instance, I don't know if you knew this, but the yoke used to be on the top of the sweater, like the Irish and the English shields, coats of armor. They would tell you which family you came from.
Oh, wow.
And the word for Icelandic sweater is peysa. And what's interesting is when the French came and they started to interact for the first time on ships, the Icelanders called the French. The French would come and say, you know, farmer. They would say, this is a farmer, but they were touching their sweaters. And the French, the word for a peasant is peysa or paysan. So the word sweater, I think I mixed the story up, but it comes from the word farmer. It's not actually a word for sweater. And it has to do with that language discrepancy or that trying to communicate with the early travelers.
So you're saying the name in Icelandic is Peysa?
Peysa.
Peysa. And when the French said Peysa, it meant something different?
Farmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to jump ahead. We don't have that much time left to ask you about, you know, and we're talking about the change of the society, to ask you about immigration.
It's drastically shifted.
Can you elaborate?
When I was there were hardly any. I think there's only 1,000 Americans right now that live in Iceland, because I just wanted to peek to see how that population shifted. I mean, the population has doubled since 1985. Wow. It just blew up. And a lot of the population came from a lot of immigration helping, you know, cultures that needed help. A lot of Polish people came over for work. Some of them go back and some of them stay. And then there were a lot of South Asian cultures that came. A lot of people who got cast out and had no place to go ended up going. So you can find more Asian restaurants on the main strip. At least that's what I think now, because I did not dine out a lot when I went. I was with all my family and friends recently. I think
something that I was thinking about was the city of Reykjavik. They heat homes geothermally, so heating costs are very low.
In the whole country, yeah, and lots of outdoor pools. That's why I think that really contributes a lot to the health of Iceland. Clean food, clean energy.
How about the standard of living?
Very high.
Everyone has similar.
Yes, I mean not anymore. I think I've seen a lot more of situations that I would call a little more run down. But when I was there, it was like you were really, really living a very high standard. Like all the homes are very well built. They have to be because of earthquakes and shifting and storms and weather. I mean, the wind can blow so hard that one of my friends was looking out the window and there was an elderly person walking on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden the wind kicked in and she grabbed onto the light pole and she flew out like a flag, and he had to crawl out of his house on the ground to try to get her down, and the two of them were flapping.
The image of flying out like a flag. I'm sorry, I laughed a little.
Are there
on
economic
that.
opportunities over there? And, you know, can people move out of one class, like say they're...
There really wasn't a class system, and the class system they have was very invisible. It was not a transparent community like that at all. I found out very late after I'd lived there that there were a few families that owned the whole country, basically.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was told, and I don't want to say anything right now that is giving anybody the wrong idea of what's going on, but that was...
Well, we'll save that for our next program, because you have so much to tell us, and we hope that you'll come back soon.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
We have very little time left, but I did want to emphasize that you see a geyser behind you now, that the geothermal activity is very important. For example, there's lots of public baths. I went to a couple of them. And also that I was told by the Polish bus driver, he was immigrant from Poland, that the town Reykjavik is heated by geothermal so that the costs are very low. How did you feel a real presence of this as being a big, enormous part of Iceland? No?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, a day trip, we'd take a little car ride just to watch the hydro plants also. It was just a fascinating natural resource. And
Hydroplanes where?
hydro plants.
Oh, hydro plants, yes, yes.
You know, we'd go under the ground and you would get to see all the turbines
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And just the fact that you could, I mean, one of your activities would be feed the kids, everybody goes down to the pool, and that's what you do in the evening, go swimming and have the hot tub. And yeah, geothermal, totally. And as a matter of fact,
It's very unique.
when I was there at the time, and before I left in 2001, I was on the tourist board of our little town, and we went to the big city, and we talked about how tourism was changing and shifting. And there was a lot of debate about why should they be allowing so much pollution on the glaciers, and I really thought they were going to go into that type of tourism. And when I came just recently, this last November, I saw a lot of geothermal activity and a lot of spas and natural water source and recreated man-made things that look very natural as the tourism. So it's really, they really managed to pull that into the direction.
Where they're taking advantage of it
Yeah.
for tourism.
Yes.
And they're building new lagoons. There was a new lagoon opening shortly, I guess, before I went there. I didn't go to it. But unfortunately, we're really out of time now. But I want to say to the public that if you want to go to this fabulous place of Iceland, Marlisa is going to be leading tours there. And, you know, I think her...
Very small groups.
I think her number was up on the screen, wasn't it?
Yeah, you can reach me on my
So you can
website.
reach Marlisa, and you know, it's just
like
a
a fantastic
non-Parel
Come on
place to
along.
go.
Did you have any availability left? Do you still
I'll do more trips.
Absolutely.
Just
we want to know more about this?
Yeah,
Well,
it's going to be
we're
fun.
going to have Marlisa back soon, I hope. And thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Looking into Culture.
Tim, skrebat, tim,